Lizbeth, how are you? What's going on today?
A lot of meetings for sure. I'm working on different projects on immigration and specifically humanitarian aid in Tijuana. So, we're nearing the next phase for Migri Map. So it's been a full-on day of just getting things planned out and following through with what's next. So it's been
Yeah,
busy, but I'm good.
you're definitely someone who, I get told, Brandon, when do you sleep? When do you ever take a a second off?
Okay. Yeah.
So you are somebody I could say is definitely probably more busy than I am and has their hands in, as many or more projects than I'm working on. And it's funny, I know that's how I came to know you. I was down there on assignment for Al Jazeera Plus, AJ Plus, to tell the story you were working on down at the border in Tijuana. And before we go dive into all of that, I wanted to go over, not just everything you do and what you're working on. Because I know you're out at UC Davis, or are you up in Fresno right now?
So now I'm in Fresno. It's summer, and I don't want to be in DC Davis during the pandemic. So I decided to just move back home with my family.
And Davis is outside of LA, like a little southeast.
It's to the north, so it's right next to Sacramento.
Oh, way up there.
Yeah, it's
Whoa.
out there. Yeah. It's super
You
pretty though. Yeah.
you don't want to be out there.
No, I don't. I had a lot of culture clash, so I'd rather be, in Fresno with, my people and just familiar faces.
Culture crash. What's that term mean?
It's more like you fit in because you're from California, but not really. Because it's like you are inserted into another space where at the end of the day you're a minority again. So it's
Hmm.
I mean, I grew up in California and in LA, and I feel like I belonged and I never had to question that belonging to that full extent. So now being there, it was just another thing that I had to go through while in grad school.
Hmm. And background, I know you are working on your Ph.D. out at UC Davis, and then is that in Spanish? And you working on human rights, or is it just like a specialty field you're working in?
Yeah, it's a specialty field, and within that, I decided to focus more on immigration.
Fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, immigration, crazy hot buzz term,
Exactly.
crazy word, triggers people, no matter what side of the political aisle or what they believe or think about it. But it's
Mhm.
crazy because I was even looking before the show and looking at the base terms. I'd say even like the root word there is like migration, and it has that "im" that prefix in front of it, and it changes the whole word around. But when you think of migration, I think you think of animals first, and you think of
Yes. Uh-huh.
like, hey, animals migrate. Some do it every year, some do it twice a year, and then I even went back and I was thinking about even like human geography, which is one of those first AP courses you take coming out of high school, and you're trying to understand. There's several themes, and I forgot all the other themes, but one
Yeah,
theme I
but that
remember,
one. Yeah.
the main theme I did remember was movement and the movement of people. And that again, migration and immigration is one of those things, and it's something we've been doing as a people. I want to say 80,000 years, 200,000 years. Just we've always been on the move since we've left
Mhm.
Africa and moved out of the place, and since we've really developed these nation states, and we started drawing up these lines on a map, a few hundred years ago, and they've been getting very, very, very more well defined as we moved into this new industrial age and into the age of space and the age of technology, and it's becoming harder for people to move. Or actually, it's actually probably becoming even more selective of who can move.
Exactly. Or who's eligible to do it without being, forced to migrate forcibly, right, with violence, or if you're doing it, basically, what are the repercussions of doing it? And I mean, recently with like our policies in regards to asylum seeking, there's a certain type of group of people who are not eligible anymore, right? Or our policies during this administration are causing that perception to happen. So even if it's a
But
natural instinct, it's just not eligible for many people.
but and again, we're going backwards in time in terms
Mhm.
of age of discovery. Let's get out. Let's leave Europe. Let's branch out. We want to get spices. We want to trade. We want business, commerce. We want to make the land we come from, wealthier. We want to bring more exotic things into the place to make it better. And as we move into this time, like, everybody's been continuing to expand out and migrating out. And even like the formation of our country, I mean, I even think about myself, in my family, where we come from, it's like, hey, we migrated here in the, early 20th century, in the mid 20th century. Like, we
Yeah.
were immigrants. We were immigrants. We came here. We had to scrap and get through and, try and make it in this country. And that's what this country is like kind of about. So,
Exactly.
have we always been accepting? Have we not been accepting? Like, what's been like the trend in terms of like historically, kind of leading up to where we are now in terms of it kind of sways and teeters with administrations on what kind of
Manage
quotas
it,
we can
right?
accept people coming in.
So, I mean, I like that you brought that point right where your family came from, because just thinking about manifest destiny, we had the colonies and then we expanded to California, we had the gold rush, and then we started, having migration from other countries that was somewhat accepted because we needed workers, right? And then throughout history, you have los braceros, which are mostly like my grandparents were braceros, so it's people who worked in the fields, during that time. So I think there's been waves of different migrants, but we don't want them to stay. We just want them to do the work and then go back to where they, originated. But historically, we've always been horrible towards migrants.
Hmm.
I mean, we had concentration camps here as well. And when people learn that, maybe in college and not so much in high school, you become angry and just want to know more why we would do such something like this, right? But like I said, it's just we have a historical record of not being so welcoming of certain type of groups of folks that come here with the idea to make it in the US, because that's, and how you said it, this is what we represent as a nation initially, expanding and knowing more about diversity and making this a real rich nation. But at the end of the day, our tactics and our actual actions are not showing that. And we see it in every year that, in our time we have DACA and then the parents of undocumented youth. So it's each time it's like a different group, but we historically have shown that we're not, welcoming so much.
Yeah. Again, it can relate back to the 19th and 20th century.
Mhm.
But even before then, in terms of like thinking of the idea and the theme of like work and a job, like, you know, I still think those terms are still so new in terms of like, we're talking in the spectrum of history, like 200, 300 years.
Mhm.
Like before it was just, hey, you had to get some kind of land, you had to be able to make sure you farmed on that land and to be able to take care of yourself and, potentially, have a family. And I even think, even probably 300, 400 years ago, we were trading women as commodities in terms of like, hey, we'll give you this, my daughter to make sure you're going to marry her. And it's
Mhm.
just like, we've come a long way, however, but like that is where we started to develop like, oh, well, hey, now we have to leave our farms. Now we have to go into cities and we have to build these cities. But, we're getting to that point, like, in terms of especially when you're thinking like we want the kind of theme of immigration in the U.S. We want people to come in and want them to work, but we want them to get the hell out
Ex-
after. But now,
And you see it in everything, you know. Um, I don't know if you've seen recently what has happened with, international students. So let's bring that point that you brought in with the idea of working. Yes, we have that rhetoric of like, who is the good immigrant? So you would say a good immigrant is someone who works, is educated, or wants to get educated in the US. But at the same time, that same profile of like students who come from other countries that want to study at our Ivy Leagues, at our Cal States or UC system, they have to go back, right? So now with the new policy that ICE rolled out this week, we're telling them that you either do this or you're deportable. So at the end of the day, even if you're educated, you're still vulnerable.
it's funny you say that. I have a bunch of students when I was coaching basketball in Kuwait.
Mhm.
A bunch of them are now in school in the university. Shout out to Fozan. I know you're listening. Big fan of the show. And, he's studying aerospace engineering or something along those lines at Embry-Riddle, which is right next to NASA in
Mhm.
like Titusville, Daytona Beach, Florida. This kid's really smart, really intelligent.
Brilliant.
And, he messaged me actually last night. And it's funny, we're talking about this today. It's like, hey, coach, I don't know if you heard the news. Like, I'm on a J1 visa, and if I can't, if they say we have to do all of our classes online, I can't be here anymore, and I have to go home. and that's back into Kuwait for him, even though he's kind of like, his family's on a work visa there because they're Indian Muslims, and they're living in Kuwait, you know, in a Muslim majority country, but his dad is works as an engineer there. But you know, it's just like, think about that stem of immigration and just being kicked out and going places, not having the security of what you would expect to, you know, either being a part of the nation state or, you know, living inside of one, you know, that certain security we give to governments to provide for us. So it's what I mean, will they execute on that? Or I mean, who we'll actually go back into ICE itself. Like, what is ICE? When was it developed? And then maybe you can lead into, you know, how that's going to pertain into what's going to happen with these kids and why they can execute on removing these kids from the country.
So I forgot the year that ICE was created, but it hasn't been too long that it's been implemented as, you know, as part of our government, you know, agencies to protect our borders and also the nation, like within our nation. So it's basically the idea that agents, right? So it's like your normal Americans who decide to apply to be enforcement agents for immigration. And, you know, they get the training that they need, and it's like when you go to school or you go into becoming a police or I guess the army and things like that, you get that training that you need. The problem here is that their work or the way that they, I guess, do everything that they're supposed to do, it's really inhumane. So the tactics that they use. So basically an ICE agent is in charge of removing, I don't like using illegal, but unauthorized, you know, immigrants in the US or someone who has a deportation order. So in this case, everyone who falls within that category of only taking online classes because their university is only providing that, then they fall vulnerable to being removed. Because, and at the end of the day, when you think about it, ICE has all of their information because they're the ones who, you know, have all their contact info, what school they go to. If they work in the university, they also have all that information as well. So that's like the biggest risk factor because they do have all that data available to them. So it's just a matter of how the capacity of them being able to do this, you know, factually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's really like you said, the language and the definitions and how we describe the people who are either here legally, illegally, unauthorized. That all those terms and definitions are really important because, you know, I even think about like the war on drugs, and you think about, which is probably one of the main reasons why we have such a, if you want to call it, immigration problem on the border, in terms of like we don't have like an okay pathway for people to enter and exit our country, you know, that want to come here even if they just want to come here for work. And is that the case, or like, you know, how would you describe, you know,
Yeah, I think you did it right. You know, I mean, our policies make it so hard to cross the border legally or with, you know, a visa, even if it's a work visa. So what happens is that folks find other ways to do it, because I think it goes back to that same concept you were sharing at the beginning with the animals. It's just a natural instinct to migrate, and it comes in our biology to want to do it. And I think when there's barriers or like the border wall that exists to prevent or to show you that you need to keep away, or it could also be read as a way to protect the nation. So it shows that there's a certain idea of crisis, of allowing the other to come into our country. So, I mean, historically, in regards to Mexico, the visa process it's long. Some people have to wait more than 10 years to be even considered to get a visa, to do it the right way. Because we always hear that this idea of like, why don't they just do it the right way? Go back and then apply and do it the right way. But some people can't even be considered to apply. So I think that's where the issue comes in, that it's super exclusive sometimes, that it's just not an existing idea anymore.
Why would they want to make it so exclusive? You know, I'm gonna play dumb here.
Yeah, I know.
You play the question in terms of like, well, hey, you know, why wouldn't they come in the right way? You know, why does it seem like it's so exclusive? Why is it so much harder for, you know,
a certain community, for example?
Yeah, to be able to get into our country.
So
if they're just coming here for work and then exiting for work as well.
Yeah, so I would say that's one of the things that would encourage someone to come to the US, right? And it's been like our historical idea of why, just to come here and work and then, send money back to their families or home country and then eventually go back. But people love the US. They want to make a life here, or they have kids here, so they want to stay here. So let's say they did have a family back in Mexico, in Guadalajara, for example, and they've made a life here in the US. They got used to life here. So now they bring their kids here, and maybe like a newborn as well. And that's where you would find someone like a childhood arrival, like a DACA, student or DACA recipient. So that person grows up feeling like an American because, they learn everything. They go to school with us. They learn the language. Some of them speak better English than most of us that come back and forth, And I think what ends up happening is that at the end of the day, we start noticing that immigration is only open to a certain type of community, which is usually white European folks. But then if you come from like, I guess, a community of color, poor, then you don't become the ideal or the one that we want in our, to be a part of our country legally. So there's a lot of like race involved in this whole situation. And I think it creates moments like the caravan, where folks have to just leave their countries from El Salvador, Guatemala, and then, cross Mexico and then hopefully get to the border, and then you don't know what's going to happen thereafter they arrive. So it's basically, if you're brown and if you come from a poor country, then forget it. It's harder for you.
I mean, is that just the reason, though? Again, I'm going to be devil's advocate.
Yeah.
As much as I want to agree with you, it's like, is that just the case? I mean, people, again, you brought up the caravan, and like, I cannot stand, I got people in Florida, even family members, just like, is it even safe there? The caravan's got, I'm like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Please stop watching Fox News. It's not actually news. Just 10 years ago, there was a caliphate coming from the Middle East with Obama leading it. It's the president. Like, you make no sense. These are no arguments.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Based in facts. And if you want to say there is a caravan, well, ICE and the administration has caged. I don't know the exact numbers. I mean, last time I heard it was like 15,000. Kids that we've separated from their parents, and or whether even to play devil's advocate again, like, okay, let's say these kids weren't with their parents and someone was just using them to enter and get in the country. We aren't sending these kids back. We're just keeping them locked up on the border.
We're losing them in the system. We don't know where they're at, which was initially what had happened too. So they take away your kids. They didn't do the right paperwork to see where your kid was going to be sent out to when separating. So just imagine you do this whole ordeal of migrating to, in Mexico, it's known as the Cemetery of Migrants, because Mexico is not as friendly to the migrant community from, their south border. So just imagine you don't know where your kid's at, you're due to deportation, but your kid is still stuck in the US or somewhere within these facilities or camps.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, I mean, the wall that's, between the border between Mexico and I think Guatemala right there. I think Mexico has like two neighbors, maybe Nicaragua as well.
So it's like the Tapachula area, there's a river there, and crossing there seems easier. I mean, way back in the day, like a few years ago. But then now with like all this migration that's calling more attention, there's human barriers also. So even Mexico is playing with the idea of, closing their borders in a capacity that's super, it's just basically catering to the US.
And so, I mean, you were talking about before about these kids getting lost into the system. I mean, what is the administration looking to do with them? And what, why are we housing these children or kids? Why aren't we either sending them back or, again, like we talked about, and I think, the biggest issue is why is there no proper channels for people to enter a country or become citizens or become, DACA or even Dreamers, and maybe I'm not sure which one program is going to lead them to a good pathway towards citizenship, but I mean, what are they looking to do? Like again, you say a lot of them are lost in the system. What is that? What are the ideas that are running through my head? What does that mean?
Yeah, so when I say like lost in the system, it basically means that either they were adopted or they were taken into, a place where they were just housing all the kids. So it means that we don't know where maybe a certain amount of them are currently or in that moment where they were, taken to. So I mean, some kids don't even know the language, and officers or agents didn't even know how to speak to them either. So you have this miscommunication as well. So there was no way of solving this issue. So then you have parents who have been deported and they're looking for their kids. And there's been like a lot of like social media advocacy in regards to this, to find a way to connect the parent with the kid again, even if it means to get, the kid deported as well to reconnect with the family. And I remember one story that was really just, emotional in the sense that the kid was then, the mom got deported, the kid was still in a facility. They reunite them after a few months. And the kid was really upset with the mom, saying, "Why would you do this to me?" So then you have kids who are traumatized with this experience, because just think about it, kids in cages, like those two things are not, no, you know what I mean? It's like, no. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we treat our pets and our, animals way better than a kid who is not American. So
Yeah. I mean, just think about
when
a
did our
zoo.
administration
They'll
get
treat the
to that?
kids, animals in the zoo better than they would treat these kids coming from, another country. Again, illegal or not illegal, we can't call ourselves the best country in the world if we don't know how to treat guests as well as our own citizens, which I think we
Or
have a
another
harder
human
time.
being, like we don't have, I don't know, we're not, something happened along the lines to say that even a kid's life is not important to us. And, it's really unfortunate that it became a hot topic in its moment and there was a lot of support and the media was covering it. But unfortunately, this is something that has been going on for even before this administration. So why, I mean, I appreciate the idea that we're highlighting all the bad things Trump is doing, but all these systems were in place before him. So we need to be super aware of all these things to say that he's able to do everything he's doing now because there was a system in place that he tweaked and is learning how to do and undo to make things happen.
Totally. How I got to connect with you was covering the stuff you're doing on the murals on the wall on the Tijuana side of the border. And I met a bunch of people, a bunch of stories of
Yeah.
telling about individuals who are down there and who have been deported, who had came here illegally when they were children, 4, 2, maybe 6 years old. They lived here their whole lives. Some of them have even served in the military, and
Exactly. Yeah.
they get shipped back. And Isaac, who I was talking with today too, like he's one of the stories, just like I get sent here, I'm engaged to somebody, and then I'm over here in this country and I have no idea. I don't even know Spanish that well. you
Yeah,
know and,
exactly.
and it's just like, hey, good luck, get the hell out of here. There's no assessment. And you're right, it's not just the Trump administration. A lot of it doesn't pay to solve any problems in our political atmosphere or
Yeah.
environment. Yeah, you think about what happens in the Senate and how many bills are on Mitch McConnell's desk. And again, to not even be partisan. I mean, he's just the Senate Majority Leader. He's the
Mhm.
one who makes that final push put in front of the president's office. Whipping the votes up, but that stuff doesn't get done. Like I mean, we claim to be the best, but we can't even get a proper bill or amendment or law put in place.
Exactly.
I even think in one of the what's it called packages, the stimulus packages, we had to bail out the who are those
Oh
people
yeah.
that the lobbyist industry because they're like, you can't even get a bill or law done in DC unless we're here. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, we're so dependent, like, you know, like a drug addict to a drip, that we need these lobbyists in order to actually get shit done, and they're not even looking out for people's best interests, but other
No.
businesses and
Putting
corporations.
more money in their pockets, and then meanwhile the human life is being affected. I mean, people are still being affected by the lack of support from our own government. It's like people can't even pay their rent. And that's just thinking about citizens or people who are here, documented, that are eligible to get some type of like, government relief or state relief. So I mean, what's what are we prioritizing as a nation? Obviously
I,
not its citizens. you know?
No, I think there's, and
Mhm.
I think where the, everything that's happening right now, there's a very, very, very massive turmoil. Everybody is at each other's throats. You're left, you're right, you're liberal, you're conservative, you're racist, ignorance, and it's just like we've been in this big like daze in terms of terrible communication issues. We haven't actually thought about policy and in taking part in civil duty and civil service in our neighborhoods and our municipalities and the country itself. And now it's like, hey, we want to get stuff done, but we have no idea how to get it done.
Yeah,
It's
or we have to find what resources we do have on the ground. That's why I love the work that a lot of activists are doing. And in regards to every movement that's out there, the Dreamers, Black Lives Matter, because at the end of the day, you have to be there in person, present. You have to be pushing from every form possible. Like social media is vital, especially right now that with social distancing and, being afraid of getting COVID. I think it's really great to see what's working with all of these movements to see, okay, how can we maybe change the way that we do politics and actually get something done, on the political realm, because we can't even pass any laws to protect, the dreamers who we so much seek to protect. And that means that we're never going to agree to anything. Nothing's going to happen, even if there's a huge momentum going on and there's a huge support for this community. At the end of the day, something fails and we don't get it done. So is that what's supposed to happen each time? Like, there's unanswered questions for everything in our government right now.
completely. And like I said, you're here as an activist, really pushing and promoting for people who, either, are even more marginalized. And I think that's the issue, that even, regular people in this country are feeling marginalized by their government and, bigger interests than themselves. So, people just really need to realize that, like, hey, we're all being infringed upon in terms of the things we need to be happy. And was it life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness? Those are all things being taken
Yeah.
away from us. We're working more than ever. We're told we have all these great technologies to do all these amazing things, and they're gonna, oh, we're gonna help you. This blood transfusion is gonna help you live 200 years.
Mhm.
Yo, we can't even make sure someone's getting fucking insulin, and we also can't
Exactly.
even make sure that someone's not getting type 2 diabetes from their diet and exercising every single day. And it's like, there's bigger problems here that we got to work on before we can make that jump into
Exactly.
supremacy, or the next dimension that we want to get into. There's a lot of things we got to refine, and we're like we
Yeah.
talked about earlier, we're so good in this country at procrastination or just looking the other way. Like,
Mhm.
okay, hey, this is important now. Whoa, squirrel. It's like the dog
Yeah.
and Up. Like, oh, squirrel, squirrel, and we completely
Exactly.
forget about everything.
And while we're at it, we're like posting it on social media while something real is actually happening. And I mean, we all have to take care of ourselves some way. And, self-care is like the biggest thing since, I started college. People always talk about self-care, but I really don't know how to do it. So it's like, what does it even mean? But I think sometimes we take that to an extent to say self-care means I'm going to forget about everything else and just focus on me, which is super dangerous, because then whatever you're capable of doing to maybe like support something with whatever you're good at already, you're just letting that go because you're more focused on your own needs and
Well,
not anyone else's needs.
that's like what happened in America. Like, we were forced to,
Mhm.
hey, you got to come here, you got to work hard. Okay, I think everybody got that message, but
Yes.
then
Yeah.
it came down to, okay, I need a little help, like, but I don't know people who speak like me, speak the same language as me, or look like me. So okay, everybody breaks off into small little immigrant communities
Mhm.
and ethnic communities where people know each other and they listen to each other. They believe in the same beliefs and have the same values. So okay, we told everybody they got to work hard, but now we brought everybody in here, and now after 44 years, we got this little tribal mess of everybody from this place and that place, but
Mhm.
everybody's broken off into their own thing, and they don't, and it's like all it's such a simple, it's not simple, but like it's so it's a basic tribal thing that we've always been fighting as a
Exactly.
people and as a species, you want to say. So now it's just like, okay, now we actually have to finally deal with this, and we are going to be diverse and live together, which is really, really, really hard, and why
Mhm.
a lot of people are against it, like, because it is really, really hard, and
Mhm.
that's it. Now I wanted to go back into the work on the Tijuana border wall and the mural project you're working on, because you have been working with, like I said, kids and now adults that have been working, that have been experiencing this, immigration turmoil and problems, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, some people who
Mhm.
had it.
Even
So
more
tell
with,
me more
I'm
about the
thinking
project.
of Andy, who's like maybe close to 80, 70, he grew up in the Central Valley, Madera, which is right next to Fresno. And then, after serving in the military, he gets deported back to a country where, obviously language is a barrier, getting used to life there. And then at a different age, then it's so hard for someone like Andy in comparison to someone like Isaac to navigate that space in the same way to survive, right? Because at the end of the day, it's survival mode. It's not, I'm just going to adapt my life to the situation. It's like, I need to survive each day because I don't know this place. And even if I know something, or I'm proud of being Mexican American or being born in Mexico, grew up in the US, being back in that, place where you were born doesn't necessarily mean that that's where you want to be. And I think that's what a lot of our immigration policies don't capture all the time. Why do people want to stay here? Why don't we provide those pathways? Hearing all these stories, even if they do the right thing with the idea like Andy, or we have other folks there like Hector, and then Robert, who served, or someone in their family has served any type of focus here in the government. But at the end of the day, even if you were a veteran, you could still get deported. So that tells you that we don't take care of our own.
And these gentlemen are actually enlisted or have been enlisted. There's like records of them being in the military.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you see them out in Tijuana. They were recently, just this week, showing up and, creating consciousness at the border with, Vanessa Guillen's case, who, we all know what happened to her. And it's so unfortunate that like a female of color, from our community as well, like all this situation happened to her. So I think them taking that conversation to the border as well shows like, you don't take care of your own in the US, someone who was born in the US, then what about us? You already discarded us. So I think that conversation shows that where's the value in human life of people of color from the US, from both sides.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that story on is it Fort Hood in Texas or was it North
that's for,
Carolina?
it's in Texas. Yeah,
That was a gruesome story.
exactly. Yeah,
Whoa. I mean, even the other, I don't know if he's a private first class like she was, but I don't even know if she's a private first class, but she's a private, and they were on a manhunt for him, and he, you know, killed himself
yeah.
when they were closing in on him. So, you don't want to properly assume until innocent until proven guilty, but wow, what what a
Yeah, that
story.
story, it has shocked a lot of us, and taking away the idea of, I mean, just considering the fact that she spoke up and said what was going on, so I think there's a lot of power in speaking up, because her story will create some type of change,
Hmm.
so that's why I think, like, now connecting it back to the border and that mural that we're working on, is the idea of your voice matters. You speaking out is more than just a political act. You're validating your existence, and there's many people that want to hear what you have to say to learn from your experience.
Completely. And for everybody who doesn't know the story that happened, there was a young woman, about 19 years old, I believe she was,
Super
out of
young.
Fort Hood, Texas, and she had spoken up about some sexual, call it abuse, harassment she was experiencing um, in her platoon or regiment. I don't know the exact term for it, but she had been voicing this opinion for, weeks or even months, and about 2 months ago, or even a month ago, she went missing. And it wasn't until like a week or two ago that they had found out that they had found her body, um, like her bones, like out in the marsh or something. And like
Mhm.
they, again, one of these cases, like we're seeing a lot of police brutality going on. It's like the channels we have for people to um, make disputes or claims, or you want to say even suggestions to make things better, they kind of don't exist. And like I said, as a white person, I think a lot of other white people are experiencing this for the first time as well. Like, oh wait, now this is experiencing us. We don't like this either. And it's like, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that's happening to everybody, and a lot more people have been marginalized for a lot longer time than you. How do you develop the empathy? How do you take a second to listen to people who have been more marginalized, or marginalized just in general for a longer period of time as you? I think the weird one, again, like where you're just like, oh, you're almost listening, you're almost getting it when,
Yeah.
yeah, especially like the Me Too movement, and kind of what we're seeing with like police brutality right now is like somewhat of a Me Too movement in that people are speaking up. We're seeing all these things that we don't like about these systems that we thought were the systems that were always going to be. But if we know anything, that the only constant people like to say is change, I think, is just chaos. There's always going to be chaos. Nothing's ever going to be
Perfect. Or
just be in
yeah.
general, like reality, existence. Like there's so much stuff in play. Like to make sure something's always going to change. Like we have to be able to pivot and move and grow with everything that's going on. So, you're like listening, like, well, I can't say what I want to say. You can't say what you used to be able to say. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing. It's just, hey, you're actually learning right now that what you're saying might offend somebody and they don't want to hear it. You can still say it.
Yeah, but you're gonna get called out. Yeah.
But now
Right.
you know that someone's gonna take offense to it, and maybe somebody's not just gonna come up to you and say, hey, listen, I really didn't like what you said back there, kind of really made me feel this way. Someone might try and come for your job. Someone might try and come for your livelihood. Like these are these are interesting times, and with cancel culture and everything going on, like it's not, you should never worry
all the time. Yeah.
people shouldn't have to worry about what they say, but you should be able to have a conversation with somebody to say and understand when you say something, it has repercussions, it has consequences. But you have free speech. You can say what you want in America. You want to fly a Nazi flag, as much as I think that's the worst and terrible thing, you do that on your private property. Fly a Confederate flag, go ahead. Private property, do it. But don't tell other people that they have to fly that flag as well.
No.
Like,
Or don't get mad when someone stares at you a certain way. I mean, in Fresno, we have that. And you drive and you get closer to a city called Clovis, you see a lot of that.
really?
So you feel uncomfortable. Oh yeah, you feel uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable. Or when my parents are in the car, I'm just like, I just roll my eyes. I'm like, why is that necessary? Why do you have to parade it around? What are you trying to say? But I think you're right in that idea that you could do all you want to do, but just know that something else might manifest from your actions or your words.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that, it's so funny. When you ask somebody why they still fly the Confederate flag, and I'm from the South, and I've seen plenty of those Confederate flags. And it's like, oh, well, it's our history and our heritage. And I'm like, okay. So, China hasn't forgot who they were. They've had their country burned down and bombed. Japan had 2 nuclear bombs. I mean, they didn't forget. They changed the flag, the emperor with the sun, with the red stripes coming through it. They gave it up. Like, Rome was burned down, 10, 15, 20 times. We haven't forgot about Rome. We still go visit as a tourist attraction. Like, oh, the Colosseum, here it is.
Yeah.
It's again, it's just like the meaning, the message that's behind it. Like,
I mean, that's why do you think we're throwing down all these statues? Because monuments, manifest trauma. They try to input this idea that this is what historically is accepted, right? Even if it's the wrong side of history, even if it means, killing and massacres, but bringing them down, it's saying we're not okay with it anymore. We want to transform the way that we're talking about a historical moment. And there's so many people who are against it, but I mean, if you love something, you're willing to transform it.
I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, like they'll try and throw up a 1984 quote about tearing down statues and rewriting history, and it's like, no. Those things weren't put in place even before the Civil War. Those things were put in place in the 20th century. They were put up during Jim Crow. I mean, even there's a Robert E. Lee statue in Arizona, which wasn't even in the South or the Union. It wasn't even a state yet.
Like in another space, yeah.
They put one up in like the 1980s, 1990s, and it's like, come on.
Exactly.
You don't see the correlation between, what was the point behind that? Yes, I'm a history major. I still have learned about these things. I think you even want to learn about these things as a history major when no one else talks about them. It makes it more fascinating. but they're not going to disappear. And again, you can't help but look at like, hey, why are we being stranglehold by this resistance for change in our country? Or just, being a young activist, you want to see positivity, you want to see change in the world, and, opportunity for more and more people. But
there's always that pushback, because I don't know where this idea comes from that if we all have dignity in life, that means that my dignity is at risk, right? So it's like, there's always this idea, and I think it's just historically represented, the idea that we need someone beneath us for us to have some type of commodity, or to have the idea to then we could move up the ladder. And that's unfortunate, because at the end of the day, it's like we're just reproducing different systems. So we can't imagine a world without police. We can't imagine a world without like these historical monuments. But then we're making it happen. So
yeah. Well, I mean, the quote reigns supreme: "Ignorance is bliss." And I think you had mentioned it in terms of the historical significance of why we had immigration in our country. Once we started to really expand Manifest Destiny, push out west, we needed people to work. We needed people to build the railroads. We needed people to start, once we got into this industrial age, to really start filling these factories, to move in, And we were able to do that with a lot of European immigration in the mid-19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century. The South European movement, the Eastern European immigration that came in, and that filled up these factories and warehouses. However, what gets to the point, like, or the initial point you were trying to get at with this was, we needed people to come in and work, and okay, you have to work, and like that's it. But America was different in the fact that we still had that ladder that you could climb out, that you could always improve your class, your socioeconomic class, and but now everybody is having a hard time climbing that socioeconomic ladder. Everybody is having a hard time like trying to, grow. And I think a lot of the stuff going on, whether it's police brutality, this and that, it's again, these police officers aren't the most affluent, well-off individuals. It's again this like little socioeconomic strife that's being clouded in, the race relations, to the police brutality, to the immigration issues and problems we're having. Is just a lot of people are mad. A lot of people aren't able to be happy, or like seek their happiness on a daily basis, or throughout their lifetime. But let's sink back into immigration and migration and policy. What are some solutions that we have, or that at least that you have, or things that you've worked on or studied for, let's say, just immigration policy in the United States?
So in regards to my research, I focus more on childhood arrivals, so those that we recognize as the dreamers, or the ones who are under DACA. But I expand the idea that anyone who migrated as a child or during their youth years in the US should be considered for some type of relief of deportation. So deportation should not be used on this community at all, which means that even if, because I mean, life happens, you might, commit a crime or an infraction that then starts accumulating into something else, or the way that you were raised allows you to choose a different type of life than what most of us would want. So what basically I'm trying to propose is the idea to abolish and, really take away the idea that anyone who came in here to the US, when they were children, to actually be able to get some type of relief and have a pathway to become either a permanent resident or a citizen, but to delete deportation, because I think having that cloud of deportation over you growing up in the US, or knowing that you're vulnerable to it for one little thing or another, it's not a good way to live. So the idea would just be to take away deportation, at least for this group, and then let's find a way to push forward for a policy or legislation that would actually incorporate them legally into the US.
And what does that look like in terms of like, do we want to add and provide like additional schooling systems for these dreamers or people in the DACA program? What does that look like in terms of like, okay, you got the go. What kind of like things do we want to start implementing in terms of like, are those facilities, or those additional schools? Like, what kind of processing needs? Because again, I would say that we don't have enough even judges in courts down on the border that are even dealing with all this. Like, we could, hire so many more judges, federal judges, to actually be in courts down on the border that actually processed and dealt with all these things. A bunch load more clerks that were able to actually deal with all this. But I think,
like
some
having the
judges
capacity, yeah.
are one judges to 15,000 cases. It's like, how is it? Same thing with like medicine. Like, how are we going to expect one doctor to spend just 4 to 10 minutes understand why your problem or issues is, and then just send you off? Okay.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I guess thinking about it in practical terms, like what would we do then? Let's say there's an agreement, hopefully, about this, right? To say, okay, we all agree that we don't want deportation to be the punishment for childhood arrivals, including those with DACA, including those with a criminal history, that the only thing that matters here is that they came as children in the U.S. and, they spent their life here. It means that they came here undocumented, or they came here with a visa but overstayed their visa, or they didn't renew, or someone who came in here with a permanent residence. So anyone who's a non-citizen and grew up in the U.S. So you would have people from different ages at this moment. So you would have, kids who are recently coming in, and then you would also have adults who are still either permanent residents, which would be most likely the case. So this idea would invite, to create amnesty for this group. And you would just have to provide certain documents to show that, in fact, you did come here as a minor. And that's it, and maybe provide proof of, I don't know what else would immigration need. But it seems that the idea of erasing criminal history would help so many, because at the end of the day, DACA doesn't provide that opportunity for you if you do have a criminal history, or if you didn't come into the U.S. at a certain, during a certain time period.
Now, what happens to these people's parents in that meantime? Let's say they all end up getting, caught into an ICE raid.
Oh, yeah.
They get deported?
Yeah, they would get deported. So either you have expedient deportation, or, which is most likely the case for some, is that you're put into prison or a detention facility. You serve a certain amount of time, or while you're being processed out of the country, you spend some time in a detention center, even if it's a weekend, which is something that has happened to Tanya, and she narrates that in her narrative, who is also part of the mural. She was detained on a Friday by the police. ICE picked her up, and then they processed her out of the U.S. during that weekend. So even if, you didn't commit a crime, you would still go through these different channels. And Isaac narrates that as well in his narrative. He's like, I didn't even go, and I remember that line clearly. He would say, not even on a field trip did we ever go to a jail, but this was my first time experiencing this. So imagine you have the ideal immigrant that we always talk about, someone who goes to school, tries to stay out of trouble, but then they've experienced this thing on their way out of the country, which is a forced removal. It's just not a humane thing to do. There's no human way to do this, but to delete deportation as the punishment for them.
What do these facilities look like? Have you ever seen one or been to one?
No, I never seen one in person, and I'm thankful for that, because I think just hearing the stories and then working with different narratives, and also seeing the other digital stories and where we do incorporate images and, hearing their stories, it's not like the best place to be or to house anyone. And more so right now with COVID, it's like they're being sprayed with toxics. And I think, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to kill them while they're in there? What's going on?
They're being sprayed with what?
With some chemicals.
In terms of to try and keep them
It's supposed to keep them, supposedly what I've read, it's to keep them healthy. So I think it's every 15 minutes, but it's heavy chemicals.
Oh
it's all over the internet, and no, that's not practical in any way.
You got to send me a link to this, because this is nuts. That's, again, I want to see, put a visual to it. It's always, I think, better and always moving for an individual to see what to actually get a gist of what's happening and what's going on. But it's to just imagine that they're okay. We're going to keep you safe, but we're going to spray you with.
It just makes me think of. It's not the first time it happened. So there's images, and I'll send you a link of that too. The braceros, so the migrant workers who came in during World War II to support the troops that went overseas to fight. And then we needed workers in our economy. So what ended up happening is that before they were eligible to full on be called braceros and have that permit to work in the US, they had to go through a checkpoint and where they were basically naked, forcibly naked, usually men, and they were inspected by officers and also by doctors. And they were also sprayed with pesticide. So there's images of this. So this is not the first time we treat immigrants in this way. It's just in a different context. So, I mean, we're known for this. It's not something that we're proud of, so we don't talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't want to talk or look at the poor parts of U.S. history. I mean, you think about the Tuskegee Airmen, getting them all syphilis when you weren't knowingly telling them they were in some kind of experiment to see or they were dealing with stuff. The craziest one is the Harvard LSD studies. The big major experiment called Operation something, and there was recently a guy who came out with a book who can even tie not just Ted Kaczynski, who was the Unabomber, who went nuts and he's out there running around town blowing up abortion clinics, but he's they could even tie it to Charles Manson now, and Charlie Manson, who's running around, doing what he did and actually getting those LSD doses, going in and out of jail, being out and let out of jail. So it's, there's a lot of things that MK Ultra, that's what it was called.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's just like, what were we doing, or why were we trying to do this to people, to test and experiment them on to see if they can handle and treat things? But I think that just comes down to we're way too closely tied. I think Americans are way more violent and way more barbaric than we like to think we are, or else we wouldn't spend this much money.
I think we become aware with, people telling their stories or learning in college when you take maybe a class on Latin America history or literature, and you start reading about the military coup in Chile, and you start realizing that the U.S. had a lot to do with that as well, and the torture and disappearance of so many. Then you start realizing that we're not so great and that we have a dark history, not just within our own nation, but abroad. And that's what causes migration as well. So we have all these interventions in, Latin America. And what do we expect people to do? To stay in a country that we, manifested all this violence in?
I don't want to laugh, but like, oh my God, yeah.
Right? Like, where are they going to go? They're going to come to the U.S. because at the end of the day, we have fault in this.
Well, especially, I mean, you mentioned it, the coup in Chile is, I was in Santiago, and I went to, and it's surprisingly the first 9/11, because it was, happened on September 11th for them,
exactly.
1973, and oh my God, you leave that museum and you're just like, I don't know how no one wanted to shoot me as I left that place. Like, if they knew I was an American, like, oh my God, I can't believe we did that, in terms of supporting the military branch that had these people on a, what is it? We just had that here in LA where they put people, you have to go home by a certain time. You have a curfew.
Yes, in Spanish it's toque de queda.
They had an 8 p.m. curfew every day for 12 years. People snitching on each other because they were worried, that the whole idea of communism that we claim to be so scared of and not want to do here, but we put people through those situations other places. The military getting people with cinder blocks and dumping them in helicopters off the coast, and you're just like, oh my God.
There's just so much like atrocity that we as humans do to other humans for different interests, right? At the end of the day, is power. And I think about it, like everything that Trump is doing, he is spreading fear, and we are feeling fear, regardless if you're an immigrant or not. You're feeling fear for, even now, like with universities being forced to somehow think about in-person, classes, there's fear also involved in that situation. So living in a country of fear, what are you trying to do with that sentiment? You're trying to control, or I don't know what it is. It's just controlling. And in this sense, it's we're trying to control immigration by scaring folks who are watching Fox News, for example, or reading articles that are not well, written, and are saying that the caravan brings people who kill, or to say, all these things about Mexicans. So I think at the end of the day, it's like working through this lens of fear is not helping anything to, progress or to really create real solutions. It's just keeping us busy talking about it, but we're not putting any action into it.
No, I think I had my aunt send this. It's a little meme. This is America. 14% of adults can't read. Only 13% of adults can read at a proficient level. 28% of adults didn't read a book in the last year. 50% of adults can't read a book written at 8th grade level. And it's like, that's a 2020 literacy report. And it's like,
Wow.
like, guys, like, how great are we? Or we want to keep it great, or make it great again. Like, fear is one of the most basic instincts that we can invoke. And then it's also one of the tools that we use to control people.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been talking about this with a bunch of people I've had on the show. The show always leads into this. The internet, we treat it like it's like such a toy, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't go on there and throw poor information out there and say, it's like screaming fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah,
You see the way people, some of my family members just posting stuff online. Like, no, you can't post that. That's not real. That's
like,
not
look at the
true.
source. I always find myself telling my mom, because with the COVID situation that was happening, and at the beginning, like, we wouldn't really know where to get your real news from because it seemed to be a really new thing to everyone. So who do you trust in what they're saying? Like, what are the measures that you're supposed to take for safety? So a lot of our family members or friends start sharing a random article saying that you could die if this happens, or if this, and that with COVID. And then someone reads it, they're going to think it's real because it's on the internet, or because it's been shared X amount of times. But just because it's on the internet doesn't mean that it's real.
To
You know?
all the conspiracy theorists like defense, the government hasn't done a great job of being the ultimate purveyor of truth, and or just treating the citizens like adults. But as you can see here, most of us, or a lot of us, still have a hard time reading, understanding, comprehending. And like you mentioned, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's real. I think a lot of us don't realize, again, that we talked about, once you come to this country or came to this country in the 18th, 19th, 20th century, you found people that looked like you. You went to those places of people that looked like you, believed in you, the things you were able to recognize from your own country. Really the most important one was value systems.
Yeah.
And even now, the value system is one of the biggest purveyor of who we connect with, associate with, and how everybody's like judging each other, even on association and friendships now.
Yeah.
So the fact that all this is happening, God, I'm just going too deep that I'm forgetting the point I'm trying to get into. Oh yeah, so even like college, we think about, I think only 33% of Americans have a college degree or finish with a college degree. That's still such a small bubble.
Yeah.
That is not a majority. And you think of the things that you or I have been through in terms of, or even I'd say most people our generation, like, hey, if you went to college, or even high school, and I went to a really tough prep school, even if I went there for sports, but it was like that magnifying glass over your head. Hey, if you cheat, if these
Yeah.
sentences, not 6 different words from where you got it from, or an idea is not close to this, we're going to expel you. And again, they did it out of fear, but it was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I have
It
to
made
make sure
it too
the footnotes,
Yeah.
the whatever it is, when
I agree.
you tag someone in it, I forgot the name of that thing. It has to be exactly that. And that even in college, I had to write a 50-page final paper on fascism from 1914 to 1945 in Italy and Germany. It's like, how am I going to write that many pages? But like, to figure that out and then put that out there, it's like you had to go through the ringer. You have to understand what you can use, what you can't use, what is actually real.
What
And now
arguments are being made, and are they valid or not?
and now you see people who either don't want to have those arguments, can't have those arguments, or the sad part is they don't even know how to come up with their own original ideas. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that
Oh
in
yeah,
terms
I
of like
understand that.
they
Yeah.
can't they don't know how to express themselves, and they don't express what they experience, what they see in the world, which is sad. And I want more people to be able to, because you know what's so unique about a republic and a democracy,
Mhm.
ancient Greece, and how it was different from Persia, and you had these rivalries, was that you had the agora, you had the place where you can just go in the middle of the square and have arguments and conversation, and things happened because you know we were able to have the greatest ideas. Were able to rise to the top. We could understand where people were coming from because we could hear what they were relating. You know, people were able to lie and fabricate things, you know, which is different than Persia, but that was so unique, and
And
we're
just
not
think
we're
about
getting
it,
away from
like
that.
if you can't express your ideas of what you're feeling or an argument, that's oppression, which means that where are we getting our outlets? Right? So that's why I think right now, like our focus time is so little that we want everything given to us in like sound bites. We want all this information to come to us without having to think so much. So that's why a president like Trump works, because he says one thing, he said it said in such a way that some people connect with him. That's why we have, you know, other communities just saying, well, this is how it's always been, because they don't want to push forward for something else to change. So if you don't have people who not necessarily have an education, but know how to defend themselves with words, with reading, with arguments, or even writing, then you are creating a population that's just going to be submissive. And I mean, why do you think with the military coup, and I'm pretty sure you know this, a lot of books were burned because the knowledge that they produced was, you know, put in danger everything that was happening in Chile. It had a different truth. So you burn them down or you just get rid of them. So if we don't have people telling their stories, then we are never going to really know what's been going on from a personal perspective.
Agreed. And the only counter I would say is that I don't see this as too much of a negative thing. I don't think
Mhm.
that's a majority of people. You know, from the counter side of I want to say the far left, it's they're mad, they're upset right now. People are expressing and things. Yes, they shouldn't be burning down cities and they shouldn't be doing this stuff, but it's such a small majority of
Mhm.
of what had happened and things that did happen,
Yeah.
and no one is coming for you. No one's coming for you in your home. Or gonna steal your books or burn your books. Like that's
Yeah.
not there
We're
might be
not
people
there
on
yet,
on the
thankfully.
fringe there who want to do that, but they're not going to. Those aren't people who have sway and that want and can act on those things, and no one's going to let them do that. So please learn to speak for yourself. Go buy a book today. I think 50% of Americans haven't bought a book or read a book in the past year. Please go read. Get a newspaper. They're cheap, and there's a lot of stuff in it. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what bias or basis you have. You can take whatever information you want from it and try and understand where the other person's coming from. That's why we do podcasting, everybody. It's why you're listening to this show. I want you to take something away from the guests we have and the conversations we have. It's all for you. We do this for you.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. But Lizbeth, thank you so much. It's so great to connect with you again.
Thank you. It's always great.
I'm hoping we can get back down to the border, or there's some more videos that we can shoot to highlight, a lot of people who are, on the wrong side of a lot of things going on. Especially immigration is our people, and we're trying to make everybody's life as great as possible and the best we possibly can. But please let people know where they can find your work, where they can connect with you, or even take part in some of the projects you're working on, whether that's voluntary or I don't know if you guys are taking donations for some of the charities and stuff you're working with.
Yeah, so currently this week I reopened the idea of working on the mural. So we'll be adding 4 new faces to the mural, which was the original plan, but due to COVID, we had to really figure out a different way to do it because there's just no way that I could have the same amount of volunteers with me in Tijuana because it's just not doable right now with like health restrictions and for everyone's safety. So we're working on 4 different images, 2 in Fresno and then hopefully 2 in Tijuana. But if not, 4 of them will be painted in the US side in Fresno. So I'm actually working on creating a little studio here in my parents' house to be able to work on this. So my idea would be to start painting in mid-August and then head down to Playa de Tijuana in September and find a way to do it and just put the images down at the border. So if you want to know more about Playa de Tijuana Mural Project, you could always Google the website. And if you put Playa de Tijuana Mural Project on Google, you will see the website. So it's actually my personal website, which is Lizbeth De La Cruz Santana.com. And you would have all the information. We're also on Instagram as PDT Mural Project. And I mean, I'm pretty good at keeping people, aware of what's going on with the project and inviting folks to support it in any way. So I'll be rolling out a little bit more information this week and next week.
Yeah, keep me posted. I'd love to go down there. Is the border open right now? Or I know it was essential travel was allowed, but I think they closed down to essential travel now.
So the last thing I heard is that, some of my friends went down there to visit family without it being essential. So they were able to come back and forth. But right now, after the 4th of July weekend, I don't know the situation yet. So it all depends on what's going on that week at the border. But what I've seen, people are crossing back and forth. So I would say it's open, but limited.
Well, I'm hoping to go down there with you guys and help out and just take part in it. And everybody, I also did shoot a video with Al Jazeera and then for my own channel, so you can go learn about, not just Lizbeth, but a lot of people who've been affected by immigration policy over the past 50, 60 years, as well as some of the artists like Mauro.
Carrera?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mauro's great. And check out his work as well.
Yeah. He's great. You check out his work, and there'll be links to all the stuff that Lizbeth has talked about and places to connect with her. And hold on one second. I'm going to sign out. I got to do the whole sign out stick. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into the Bus Driver Experience. Thank you, Lizbeth. Remember, guys, like, share, subscribe. Send these videos all around the airwaves. Let people know about, some of the stories that we talked about. And, be an advocate for change. And it all starts with you. It's all about taking a first step, whether that's just clicking a button or whether that's opening a book or walking outside your door. You did the work. That's a great way to get going. And that's what everybody needs. And that's what people need to make change happen. So take the first step today. Open the door. Open a book. Get out there. And make sure you like and subscribe to all this stuff so we can continue to grow and have amazing more conversations. And you're either on the bus or off the bus. We're out.